In 2026, we are blessed with the arrival of two new manufacturers to Formula One. There have been many of them in the past, some good with some bad. But what can Audi and Cadillac learn from them? I'm Peter Brook, I'm joined by Nedzo's F1 Gridbox and Nav F1, and you're listening to the DRS Train podcast. Gentlemen, it's been a long time. How are we doing? It's been a, big winter break, a lot of interesting stuff going into the new season to talk about, isn't there?
Yeah, I guess so. New regulations, new aero, new energy deployment. That's going to be the big talking point. But yeah, definitely some interesting talking points and some interesting things to look at going into the new F1 season.
Yeah, I mean, for me, literally 3 months since I recorded something, but same shit with regards to the new regs. Alonso has a Honda engine, and it seems like it's absolutely shit. There's no level of sandbagging that might be happening there. They are just shit. So, yeah, 2026 is going to be a slog for Alonso fans again, but looking forward to the seasons, especially because of the new teams.
Yes, it's been a long time since we've had two new teams in the sport, and not only that, but two manufacturers. Now, one of them, Audi, obviously has bought out Sauber, so they're kind of they've got a bit of a head start on this. But Cadillac is completely new; it's an entirely new operation. They haven't quite got. They're having to start out with Ferrari engines, but they'll eventually become their own works team. So we thought the idea with this video, we would basically look at every other manufacturer that's been in Formula One history, and just assess their debut seasons, or in some cases, debut races. In Formula One, and see who's survived the test of time and who didn't, and that's kind of the basic concept of today.
This is the DRS train.
Yeah. And must be said that with 1950, there is the caveat that yes, it is the first F1 season, but a lot of those debutant teams we're going to look at, they were obviously racing for years and decades before. So why don't we start with the letter A to start the video and start with Alfa Romeo in 1950?
I mean, well, to be honest, they started about as well as you can because they won the Drivers' Championship in 1950 with Nino Farina, and had there been a Constructors' Championship, they would have steamrolled that as well. But they'd been around. I mean, as a car manufacturer, they'd been around for almost 40 years at that point. They built a lot of. They'd run a lot of racing cars in the pre-war era in the 1930s, which Farina in particular had done a lot for them. Fangio was quite new to them. But the car they used, that 158, it was already about 13 years old when they entered it in Formula One. It was built before the war, but everything kind of went on hold before that. But yeah, it was about as good as you can start a campaign in Formula One. What they did.
Yeah, pretty much. I would just like to point out there's a fun fact. I believe Enzo Ferrari worked at Alfa Romeo before he made his own team. Yeah, but they also had Luigi Fagioli, don't forget. He was a pre-war legend. But yeah, other than that, they just kind of rinsed everyone, really.
Yeah, I mean, it was first season. It was never going to be the most competitive. I mean, it was only really French, Italian, and British teams that took part, and the French and British teams were very small compared to like Alfa Romeo, Ferrari, Maserati. And this was an era when it came to car performance, the only thing that really mattered was engine power, because the chassis were more or less the same. Aerodynamics and downforce were not taken into consideration. A bit of variation in tyre performance because they had Pirelli at the time. And you also had things like Engelbert and Continental and stuff, which you haven't seen in Formula One for years. But yeah, they had that supercharged inline 6 engine, and it ran perfectly well, and they won. It was a clean sweep. I mean, there were 7 races. Obviously, one of those was Indy 500, but they won all 6 of the other ones, and yeah, it got Farina the title.
Yeah, but it's also a good time to think about Alfa Romeo when they came back, because I think with a lot of those constructors, they come into the sport and they leave as well. So they come back again 25 years later, and they did come back in 1979. But I think that it would be better to look at the first full-time season in 1980, where they did score on their first race in 1980. Even though they had come back in 1979, they had only competed in a few races. And yeah, they had quite a famous spell in F1 in the 80s. A lot of famous liveries with some likable drivers.
Yeah, I mean, they had the Marlboro liveries, which looked very similar to the McLarens at the time. I think the only drivers I really remember from that Alfa Romeo era was De Cesaris. He drove for them. Bruno Giacomelli drove for them as well in the same season as De Cesaris did in '82. And Mauro Baldi. I think their best season definitely was 1982 because De Cesaris nearly won a couple of races, and Giacomelli was also up there.
They had
yeah, I mean,
Mario Andretti in '81 as well.
yeah, I forgot about that.
But they
but
yeah. They had, I mean, De Cesaris, because De Cesaris, he went from McLaren to Alfa Romeo, so that was a bit confusing because he went from one Marlboro team to another with cars that looked almost exactly the same.
Yes, I will just say that when they left F1 in 1951, they had a ridiculously high winning percentage, and then as soon as they joined in 1979, that just fell so drastically to the point where they basically became like a nobody on the statistics.
Well, wasn't their win percentage 100%? When they left,
it could have been.
If you don't,
no, actually, no, it couldn't have been because of the Ferrari got good in 1951. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, it would have been probably if you don't count the Indy 500, it would have been like 80 to 90% or something.
Yes.
But yeah, that mid 80s revival wasn't brilliant. And then they took on they didn't become Tolman but they had the same. They were sponsored. No, they weren't sponsored by Benetton, but they had the green and red livery in '84. 85, so it looks like a Benetton as well, but yeah, it didn't really work.
And then
the second time.
Technically, they came back in 2019,
Exactly.
although everyone knows that was just Sauber and Alfa Romeo bought the naming rights. But there was an Alfa back on the grid for 5 years, I guess.
But somehow even more forgettable than in the 1980s. Just
exactly.
Each time they just get worse and worse. So yeah.
Well, moving from a great red Italian team in the 50s to the great red Italian team, Ferrari entered the sport in 1950, and they haven't looked back. What is there to say on them? They didn't win the first season, but they were up there.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't even turn up to the first race, obviously, basically because back in the day, teams used to get not just prize money from finishing your races in certain positions, but also they used to get starting money. So you'd get money from just starting a race, and different teams of different legacies had different amounts of money. And Enzo Ferrari didn't think that the BRDC was offering enough starting money to start the British Grand Prix, so he just didn't send his cars there.
It's one of these annoying little things because you can't quite say they've been there since the very beginning because they missed the first race.
Yeah.
In the same way that Jackie Stewart retired on 99 race starts instead of 100 as well. And yeah.
I believe Ferrari only missed like 3 races in history. There was one in the 60s as well, I believe. It might have been, I can't remember which one it was. And then there was the race after Gilles Villeneuve died, they missed, I think.
There were a bunch in the 70s, like the early 1970s, they were a mess and that they would miss like half the races. But for no reason. It was very touch and go around. Although they'd have a lot of times where they had only one driver as well.
Yes.
They didn't. It took until about 1974 when they got into this like 2-driver pairing and actually entered every race properly.
Yes.
It was a bit more informal before then.
Yeah, but as a first season, I think it was still good. They were still getting podiums with like the likes of Ascari, Serafini. Dorino Serafini, he has the highest podium percentage in F1 history. 100% because he did one race, shared a car with Alberto Ascari and got a second place. I think Luigi Villaresi drove for them as well in 1950.
Yes, he was the kind of full-time driver with Ascari at the time.
Yeah. And then they had a third car for Raymond Sommer and that the French
died
Grand
during
Prix,
the year, unfortunately.
Yeah, and the French Grand Prix, both drivers they didn't start it. I don't know why, but they ended up missing. So they only did four races in the first season.
In fact, I'd be able to. I'd just avoid French people if I could. So that's probably why.
But that's Serafini. So he only did. He actually did the main bulk of it in that shared drive. He did 47 laps, and Ascari did 33. So it's not like he did like 2 laps and then gets the credit for getting a podium or whatever. But yeah, as it is, I mean, again, another thing of Ferrari is that it was very, very new. Like their first sports car had been released like 3 years before this, so it was still quite a new company. Alfa Romeo were established and already been doing this for decades, so it's not really surprising they weren't quite up there with them. But eventually they did, as we all know, they came of age. So yeah.
Yes.
And to another red Italian team, Maserati. Exactly, Maserati also started in 1950, but again a bit technical because they entered every race with Louis Ciaron, but they weren't up there that year. They only became a bit better later on, but with Ciaron, they actually kind of struggled, and maybe they disappointed a bit for what was expected at the time for Maserati.
Well, the thing is, Maserati was known as like the quintessential privateer team rather than like a proper works operation. Like towards the mid and late 50s, they had guys like Jean Berard, Roberto Mieres, and then obviously later Fangio and all those guys. But they were in the early 50s. They were definitely kind of, if you needed just a car and you wanted to drive in a Formula One race, you probably picked a Maserati because they were pretty just reliable. And like Ferrari probably didn't lend them out because Ferrari are idiots like that. And the other teams kind of, you needed to be a works driver for them if you wanted to be a thing. So yeah, Maserati was definitely the way to go. They weren't a bad team. You talked about Ciaron. Did he get, because he got a podium in 1950 Monaco, did he get his podium in a Maserati or was that in a different car?
No, that was a Maserati.
It was in a Maserati, yeah.
Okay, so they weren't completely slow, but yeah, that was the old, I can't remember, it was the 8C LM or something like that rather than the
A6 GCM, whatever it's called. One of those ones, but like Alfa Romeo, they were an established team that had been around. They've been doing Grand Prix racing for a long time. But because it's been so long since they've been in Formula One, I think people forget how prolific they were across the 1950s. And like the Maserati 250F was basically like the village bicycle of 1950s Formula One. That just everyone.
I don't know how.
It.
Because that car was uncompetitive when it came onto grid in 1954, and then Formula One developed, and in 1957 it was the best car. So I don't know why.
I think what happened is that Fangio made it look good, and then everyone thought it was amazing, and then people were still using it up into the early 1960s, even though it was completely obsolete because by that point you had mid-engine cars and that.
Yes.
But yeah, there's a very pretty car because Nick Mason, he lives in my hometown. He has a 250F, which I got to go and see last summer that he races sometimes. But yeah, their first season it wasn't. I mean, yeah, there was that one podium, but other than that, like they missed the Belgian round, and it was lots of retirements. So, had there been a
small technicality, we set up before this video started. The three of us, we said that any works team would be a team from a manufacturer that had made at least 100 cars or so. Had Ferrari made road cars by then? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think so.
I think only one because they'd only been around for about 3 years.
Okay,
I forgot. I think I can't remember the name of the car, but I know that one of those was taken by that Italian guy who put a Jag engine in it and ran it in the.
Clemente Biondetti.
Yeah. He took it and it was literally a road car, and they were like, "Well, you can race it because there are no rules in 1950s Formula One," and so he just entered it in a race with a Jag engine.
The worst part was that also had that basically apparently this is according to people on like Autosport forums from like the early 2000s who are, in my opinion, the most knowledgeable people in the entire F1 community. Apparently, it was a Ferrari body on a Maserati chassis with a Jaguar engine. Apparently, it was the most Frankenstein car you'll ever get in Formula One history.
So it was like the 1950s version of that Ford Transit that has a Jaguar XJ220 engine underneath it. Yeah. Yeah, so they had been around. I mean, because again, we were struggling to make a definition of what counts as a manufacturer because you could say works team. Yeah, because there's a works team, but then there was also some people where it's like, well, it was named after this manufacturer, but it wasn't a works team. They just branded themselves, but at the moment that's not so much of an issue. We'll see as we get further into the present.
I can confirm Ferrari had started to make actual cars in 1947. I was just unsure.
Yeah,
but. From those three red Italian teams that everyone knew, I think now we're getting into the more interesting ones. And I think we should start with Talbot, for whom there definitely is no doubt at all that they were making cars, because they were making road cars from 1904 onwards. And they were one of the great car manufacturers of the early 20th century in the world, like obviously from France and in Europe, but they were very much known. They were going racing, they won Le Mans. And I think Nedzo can take us a bit through their first season, because they were a very big name at the time, Talbot Lago.
I don't think they ever got any podiums. They definitely got a couple of points, I believe. But basically, it was a similar situation to because obviously in 1950, a lot of the manufacturers used, as Peter said, cars that were very old. Like Alfa Romeo used their car, I believe. What the Type 158 was first designated in 1937. Obviously, Ferrari didn't, but Maserati, I'm guessing. I think the 8C was something ridiculous, like again, the 1930s. Apparently, the Talbot Lago was so old in design. That was the reason why they quit after 1950, because it just wasn't that competitive. They had a couple of good drivers from pre-war, Louis Rosier, Philippe Tonsolin. But other than that, they're just a footnote, really. The more interesting one, and I'm going to segue straight into them, is Gordini, French team. They were definitely more modern. Their success came later than 1950, particularly in 1952 with Robert Manson. And Jean Berard. But
just interrupting you for a bit, we said that for the less famous teams, we will mention a few cars. So yeah, if you just look up Talbot Lago, they made some really pretty French cars in the 1940s.
It's the kind of stuff that Cruella de Vil would drive. Like those
exactly.
Those
there was the Talbot Lago Grand Sport, the Talbot Lago Record, the Talbot Lago Baby. They made a lot of cars. So I recommend it, because it is, as Peter said, it was very much a villainous Disney car of the 50s.
I mean, to be fair, they only raced in 1950, so just the one season. They got 2 podiums, but still is But the thing is, the car they had, it was only 2 years old at the end of the day, so it wasn't ancient. But there were ones like ERA and Alta. They were running cars that were like 15 years old, and there was one team that had a car that had 80 horsepower. I think it was quite tragic. Some of the entries you had in there. I mean, they look literally like the kind of those like lawnmowers that you sit on. Some of the cars looked like that back then.
Well, Talbot was more famous in 1950 for winning the Le Mans 24 Hours with Louis Rosier in the seat. So I think, I'm not sure. I think in that race he drove 23 of the 24 hours. There is a story of that, but yeah. So he
was that the race where he drove 23 hours and 45 minutes. And
with his
the other 15 minutes, the other 15 minutes was his son doing some driving for him because he was having lunch.
Exactly. So that was what happened, and it's absolutely insane, because usually when you tell a non-motorsport fan about the 24-hour race, they're like, "How does it work? How does one driver drive for 24 hours?" And you have to be like, "No, now there are rules that you can't drive for more than 12 hours or whatever." But there's this guy who once won it driving 23 hours and 45 minutes. So yeah, that was Talbot.
It's the same way that Duncan Hamilton won the 1953 race while blackout drunk.
But bear in mind as well, I mean, obviously the hypercars and stuff, they're much faster, but they're, I dare say, easier to drive because you don't need to concentrate so much. Whereas those kind of cars, you can't just sit back and relax. They're probably not very comfortable to be in for long periods.
Maybe not at Le Mans, because you could half a track. You could at Le Mans back in the 50s. You could probably just sit there and just go.
Well, I suppose actually at the time it was a triangle. It was just there were like 2 corners. So
it was, but the 2 corners you had to take right, because otherwise you'd die.
Yeah. And also you had
to make sure your brakes didn't fail.
And also you had complete exposure to the elements as well. So all of that.
But yeah, back to Gordini. I just needed to say that for the listeners, we will mention a few cars to make sure that it actually fits our criteria.
Yeah, Gordini was, as I said, just a couple. I was like, their success came after 1950. Did they get? I don't think they did get a podium in 1950, did they? I think it was only points they may have got.
They only entered 3 races in 1950, but they were there for the rest. They were there for the rest of the decade. 2 podiums
until 56.
2 podiums in 52. Otherwise, it's not brilliant results.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of the cars, again, they are now. I think the name is now owned by Renault, and when people are always saying, "Oh, who are they gonna rebrand as?" Because they rebranded as Alpine. Gordini is like the only other kind of sporty Renault name they have, but they made like some, again, very blue, good-looking cars, but mostly sports related.
They have a similar relationship to Alpine that Alpine has to Renault. It's this they're like sports subsidiary, because they have like there's like a Gordini version of the Renault Twingo, which is just a Renault Twingo with a couple of racing stripes on it. and that.
Yeah, I think officially the official Gordini company, I think, dissolved into Renault in 1976.
Yeah.
So quite a few years after. I don't remember Gordini making any cars past 1950, but that's just me.
It very much is a bit of a technicality in terms of factory team, because they made a few cars and it was mostly tuning for Team Renault, but it does count.
Yeah, it's a shame that because there was another big pre-war French team that kind of didn't make it into F1, and that was Delage. I wonder where they were kind of around, but they clearly just didn't make it to F1.
Yeah. So now moving on to kind of a weird area, which is a bit more discussion on, let's say, three teams. There's O.S.C.A, there's Veritas, and there's Cisitalia. So those three we were kind of debating before the video started. The recording started, whether we should include them. O.S.C.A is really hard to say if they actually made road cars and whether they should count, especially as, they didn't really enter F1. Veritas did make cars, but I think, again, they were only really used by privateers, German privateers, to use for the German Grand Prix. They weren't, I don't think they were factory backed. And then Cisitalia is interesting because they weren't factory backed, but the only race they entered was the founder being like, I own the team, I own the car, I'm just going to go to the Italian Grand Prix and I'm not going to qualify.
Yeah, so I just like to say, so Veritas is definitely the most credible of these lot, because although they were mostly used, not entirely used by German drivers qualifying for the German Grand Prix, because they were used by Peter Hurt at the 1951 Swiss Grand Prix. The Veritas Meteor was used in 1952 and 1953 by West German and a couple of East German drivers. There were a couple of names that you might have heard of. Hans Hermann used one, Wolfgang Seidel. Ernst Loaf, the guy who is now credited with having the shortest Formula 1 career in history, he only did, I believe it was 6 feet before his, I can't remember what failed. It was some sort of mechanical failure. He was driving a Veritas. They are definitely the most creditable because they did make proper road cars before the war. Not before the war, before 1950, I believe. They might have done before the war as well. But yeah, the Meteor, which is a very cool name, by the way, because that's why I've said it multiple times, definitely does deserve. O.S.C.A, or O.S.C.A, as we've been saying, they ran as a works team in 1951 and in 1958. But in the intervening years, they were privateers. So yeah, their debut season in 1951, driven by, I think it was Franco Roll. I don't think it was very successful. And as we said with Cisitalia, Piero Duccio, who, what were you going to say, Peter?
I was going to say, with O.S.C.A, I mean, they were never successful, but they would count as a proper manufacturer team on the basis they had a sports car that was made in 1947. They made a few cars in the 60s, but yeah, they were, from that pace, they count, even if it was only one car. And also, there's some quite bad single.
That's why I kind of said 100 sold cars, but then, as Nedzo said before we recorded, this is entering like Group B territory where
like homologation rules and everything.
Yeah, exactly. We're trying to homologate factory teams here, but no one else has done it.
I mean, O.S.C.A, based off my Italian, it either means official special car constructors or office of special car constructors, but then Fratelli Maserati, so it's like a subsidiary of Maserati or also Maserati brothers. Okay, so it's actually like a twin, the sister team to
the Pro Drive to Maserati.
Yeah. And Veritas, like as we said, a total of 17 privately entered Veritas cars participated in only 5 races. So it really was just German drivers just wanting to have a go. I will say they tried to come back 50 years later and make a car. I really recommend you check the Veritas RS3. It never made it to production, but it has a face. The car has a face, and it just looks like a villain. If you look up the Veritas RS3, it's the kind of stuff you would probably see in like Fault 7 and stuff.
It looks
like it's a stainless. There was a special version of a Mercedes SLR, the supercar that had no windscreen. It was called the SLR Sir Sterling Moss. It looks exactly like that.
It looks like one of the fireplaces in Monsters Inc. or something. Like,
Top
like,
Gear. I think Top Gear might have done an episode on it. I think they might have done an episode on this because I recognise it.
But yeah, we hope that our producer can put some pictures on the screen right now. It depends on whether we'll have time or not. But yeah, the Veritas RS3, it is straight out of a kid's sketchbook.
Yes, pretty cool. I'd get one.
But after having discussed these, I wanted to discuss Frazer-Nash because that's definitely a name I had heard before, and they were definitely making cars in England in the 1920s and 30s, and I believe even in Cars 3 when Lightning McQueen goes to see the older cars, the Nash driver is like a reference to Frazer-Nash as well. So anyway, yeah, they were making cars in the 1920s and 30s, and they entered in F1 in 1952, and they actually got points.
Yeah, Ken Wharton, who was an all-right driver, managed to get a 4th place, I believe it was. Was it at Silverstone in 52, I'm guessing?
Switzerland.
Switzerland,
Bremgarten, okay.
Bremgarten,
okay. Yeah. There's not really much else to talk about them. I'm guessing that they just gave it a go. Decent job to get points.
Only 4 races, 2 different cars, 2 different drivers. So
yeah.
Tony Crook finished 21st at the British Grand Prix. That's a very high number of finishers.
Yeah.
Okay, he was 10 laps down. So by modern standards, he'd be unclassified.
I'm guessing that the 1952 and 53 seasons were because I mean Ascari did fit because he managed to win like 7 races in a row. I'm guessing those cars were just like 9 races in a row. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm guessing those cars were just a lot more reliable because they were. If you got less power, there's a lot less to go wrong.
Yeah, and also they're bigger grids because the idea of the Formula 2 regs was they were scared that nobody would want to race if they had to make big engines, but everyone had Formula 2 cars on tap, so they could just do it that way instead.
Yes.
Yeah.
So from those obscure entries to a semi-obscure entry, which is EMW, I had never heard of it, stands for Eisenacher Motorenwerk. Is that fine?
That's a very French way of saying it, but yeah.
Okay, great, fantastic. But yeah, they were apparently technically the successor to BMW, so run us through that, Peter. 1953.
Yeah, this was a funny one because they were basically part of BMW, but then when the split between East and West Germany happened, they just sort of got cut in the middle and just separated on their own thing. But yeah, compared to Veritas, they were actually a bit more present in it instead of just being like, oh, let's take this car and run it at the Nürburgring. Although that being said, it was Edgar Bartz just did the one race at the Nürburgring in 53. Yeah, they had the cars at a glance. A lot of them, they look, the road cars look basically the same as BMWs and everything because they were more or less the same kind of thing. But yeah, he didn't even finish the race, and that was it. Yeah.
So should we discuss the actual BMW entries now? I guess.
Yes, I mean that involves jumping forward several decades, but yeah.
So the BMW they tried entering Formula One, I believe, in the early 90s. I think the Simtek Formula One car that came out in 1994. I believe that was a prototype of an early 90s project from Nick Wirth.
Yeah,
and it was, and
which Andrea Moda wanted to get as well, I think, and didn't. Or
Yes, something like that. So there was that project, but the first actual material realized project for BMW was first the Williams engine deal and then buying out BMW Sauber. So anyway, it's funny how 20 years ago, BMW, a big German manufacturer, took over Sauber and did decently well with them and then pulled out due to a financial crisis. Does this mean that we are projecting a financial crisis in the next 5 years because another big German manufacturer is taking over Sauber and trying to make them into a big F1 team?
Well, it might do. The way the world is, it wouldn't surprise me if something like that happens. But I mean, BMW had kind of a quite staggered entry into Formula One because in 1969 they entered a few races with Formula 2 cars.
Forgot about that.
They did themselves, but that came to an end. It was the German Grand Prix because Gerhard Mitter was killed in a crash in practice, and then they withdrew from the race. Then 1981, they built a turbo engine for Brabham, which I think Benetton also used, and
Arrows.
Arrows, that's the one. I think it was known to be the most powerful engine during the turbo era, but also blew up a lot. So they had that, and then they came back again in 2000 with Williams as BMW Williams as a full works team, but it was still Williams.
Not officially theirs, yeah.
Not officially, although they've been a close collaboration because 2 years before that, Williams built the BMW V12 LMR that won Le Mans. And they built that for them as part of their collaboration. But yeah, they did that, and then it was in 2006 when they bought out Sauber and became. It was fully BMW. It's just that they called themselves Sauber to reflect the heritage, and also because they were still using their factory and had all of their staff and everything. But that first car in 2006, it was better than they thought it would be when it was meant to be kind of a transitional year. There was a few podiums. I mean, Villeneuve was there and then quit mid-season. Kubica comes in. Kubica got a podium. Heidfeld got one as well. So it was a very pretty car as well, but it did exceed expectations.
Yes.
And in the end, even though obviously we're looking at debut seasons, we all agree that they should have kept developing that 2008 car.
Yeah.
Because it never came back to them. So from BMW to, back to a red Italian car, because there were a lot of them in the 50s. Lancia and their D50. Did they already have the D50 in 54? Yeah, I think so. That D50 lost a lot of time in Formula One, had relative success? Or should I say a lot of success?
I mean, well, the thing is, it was a very unique car because it was the first Formula One car with a stress member engine. It beat the Lotus 49 to that. But also because those pannier fuel tanks, so it had a very distinctive appearance. And then it got to the point where Ferrari basically didn't have a car they could use, so they just bought them off, or they bought Lancia out and kind of absorbed them into the team and did it themselves.
Yes, that was basically Alberto Ascari's project. That was like Jacques Villeneuve going to BAR, except it could have actually worked because Ascari got pole at the final race of the 1954 season in Pedralbes, but he died before he could properly make that car materialize and be a. I think that Ascari. I'd have loved to see Ascari and Fangio in a title fight in a D50 in 1956. That'd have been a fantastic thing to look back on. But Lancia. They had a lot of potential. 1954, I think, was probably arguably, apart from Alfa Romeo, arguably the best debut season we've seen because they actually got a pole position. They actually did do some things, and they were fighting with Fangio for that win in Pedralbes in 54.
Well, they entered one race. So technically, I mean, it is their debut season, but they entered the final race, and they got pole and Verstappen.
Yes, yeah.
So things were on the up, and then Ascari died, and it just went to shit.
That just fizzled out.
Yeah.
Well, Ferrari just bought the car.
Yeah, they bought. I'm assuming they bought like the intellectual property, but yeah, that car was quite unique. I wouldn't say it was because Nav said it was like it lasted a long time. It didn't really. Literally after 1956, I don't think anyone used it.
In 1957 they had a modified version of it where they removed the pannier fuel tanks, but it wasn't very good, and then they had a completely new car for 58 and won the championship. So
I meant it lasted a long time because 4 years is still quite a lot for an F1 car, I guess.
Not back in the 50s, it wasn't.
I mean, I think there were some privateer entries that took it on as well. I mean, Ferrari did let some of their cars be used by privateers, but not nearly as many as like Maserati or like March in the 1970s or whatever.
Oh God, yeah.
Were there many that were competitive for 4 seasons?
Maserati 250F.
Yeah, that's pretty much
Instantly.
it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like there weren't many.
I mean, the 49, the Lotus, the 49 and the 72, those had staying power because they kept.
Oh yeah, the Lotus 72 was 1970 and not until 1975.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, still one of the cars that kind of lasted and did well for a while, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, now to a very, very good team that has won a lot lately. Mercedes in 1954 with one of the most iconic cars of all time, the W196. I think we can all agree that thanks to Mario Kart, everyone knows this car. A lot of people are like, oh yeah, why did Mercedes and Mario Kart do this partnership where there's a W196 and an A-Class in the Mario Kart games? and a friend of mine 3 months ago saw a pic of the car, and they were like, "Oh, I thought they made it for the Nintendo game." So that's to show you how much marketing can help you. And yeah, the W196 was one of the most famous cars of all time and set the tone, even though they only lasted for 2 years in F1.
It's interesting to note that Fangio and Moss didn't actually start driving that car until halfway through the season. It was the only time in F1 history that a champion has driven for 2 teams in a season, I believe, because he drove the first 3 races for Maserati, then the remaining ones after that with Mercedes. Obviously, it wasn't just the famous closed wheel. What do they call it? I nearly said wide body. It's not a wide body.
The streamliner.
That's what I'm talking about.
Because it was based on the old Auto Union cars in the 1930s. That set speed records.
And then they went to Silverstone with that configuration, and it was like the worst handling car in human history. So they made a non-streamlined version that was still just as good and still just as dominant as it had been on the big tracks. Speaking of Mercedes, well, they had that debut in 1954. Then the Le Mans disaster happened, and they decided to pull out of motorsport until 1987. It wasn't until 2010 when they came back with a future Formula 1 world champion and a former Formula 1 world champion and former 7-time champion even. 2010, I mean, it wasn't by any means a fantastic year, but it was a good year for... I mean, I know that they were taking over from Braun. I think they thought they were taking over a world championship winning operation, as in like one that would just be a ready-made champion. But I don't think they realised just how much Braun had fallen off towards the end of 2009.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing. But they were basically fourth fastest, but because the car had not been developed at all. But even so, they had head start in that it was an established team. They didn't have much money, but they had all the infrastructure and everything they needed.
Yes.
And so that car was a Mercedes in name only, because it was basically you could argue it's also a Braun. But it meant that they were like fourth fastest. They were upper midfield, and Rosberg got 2 podiums in 2010. Schumacher was quite underwhelming for a lot of people in the end, but it was a very I like that car. It's quite a pretty one. Has the sort of toothpaste look with the silver and the black. It's a nice looking car. That one.
Yes. Schumacher was all right, I think. I think on average he was only about 5 seconds off of Rosberg on average in races, which, considering he was 41 years old and coming back from 3 years of retirement, of doing nothing like Alonso did. Alonso did stuff in his retirement.
He was, but Rosberg scored almost twice as many points as him as well. So it was quite a big gap in that sense.
Anyway,
so quite a decent season as far as recent debutant teams come, but obviously they took the car from Braun, so not a full first entry. However, a team that often gets forgotten, a manufacturer that often gets forgotten in Formula One, is Bugatti, because some people who don't properly watch F1 are like, oh, why don't Bugatti and Koenigsegg and Rimac join F1? They make quick road cars. Surely they'd be good in Formula One. Pagani, always gets thrown around, even though they use Mercedes engines in all of their cars. Bugatti entered in 1956. They had a supreme racing legacy. They had won Le Mans loads of times. They had won most of the endurance races of the 30s and 40s. And they were making fantastic road cars. They were making some of the most famous sporty cars of the early 20th century. But then their foreign F1 in 1956 didn't really lead to anything.
Unfortunate. What were you going to say, Peter?
I was saying, by this point, the original company had already kind of dissolved, and it was being kind of held on life support by different people that were buying it out and everything. So they weren't in the best place probably to put on a full campaign in Formula One.
Yeah. I mean, they had Maurice Trintignant, so maybe, because obviously they took part in the French Grand Prix and retired, but maybe, just maybe, if they'd have competed at Monaco, they would have won the race, because Trintignant was just a god at Monaco for some reason. He won 2 races there, and he won 2 races in his entire career, and both of them were at Monaco. Maybe, I don't know, they would have been... What did you say?
Both of them were in dominant fashion. At least one of them was.
Yeah. I think 1955, he might have just inherited it because everyone else in front of him retired. But 1958 maybe was the one you're talking about. But yeah, Trantagnon was definitely a good enough driver to be able to carry that team forward. But again, just one and done. One racing it would have been Heim in 56.
Very interesting. Actually, I was going to say, like it looks like the Streamliner, but blue. It's very wide. Because chassis, it's quite quite an interesting looking one.
Yes.
Would they have just modified an endurance chassis? Because surely they didn't make it.
It looks like it probably was, because it's open wheels, but there are flanges around the wheels, and it's just quite wide.
Yeah.
So Bugatti didn't really work for them in Formula One. So when people wonder why they're not there, maybe that's kind of the PTSD from it. However, a year later, a very big manufacturer entered, and it didn't really work out for them at the time, and we never saw them again, which is quite surprising, even though they've tried to enter as a manufacturer. Well, they entered as a manufacturer for a while, but Porsche in 1957, they had a nice silver car, maybe trying to fill out the gap left by Mercedes, and they lasted 8 years.
Yeah. So, to answer your colour question, obviously that was the time of national colours in racing. So, Italy had their shade of red that Rosso Corsa that Ferrari used, and dark red that Alfa Romeo and Maserati used. France had light blue. Britain had British racing green. Germany initially had white, but when Mercedes, Belgium yellow. Japan had white. I believe that there's an entire list on Wikipedia. I don't need to read them all off to you. Porsche 1957. Did they? I'm guessing they didn't have. Well, they did. I'm not sure which driver. Did they have Joachim Bonnier? Was he their driver, or was it Carol Godin de Beaufort, or was it someone like that? Because I know they both drove for them in later years.
Having a look, they had. Well, it was very much not a real effort. They only entered one race in 57. They had Umberto Maglioli and Edgar Bach. So, but they only entered one race. That race would have been the German Grand Prix shock.
Yeah, two decent drivers. But Maglioli got a couple of podiums at Ferrari, I believe, and Edgar Bart was one of the few East German F1 drivers who actually was all right. And he then emigrated to the West and raced under the West German flag. But yeah, Porsche's success came a lot later with Dan Gurney, and he won a couple of races with them. And yeah, as I said, there's other drivers that you might know of, Joachim Bonnier, Carol Godin de Beaufort. But yeah, 1957. I wouldn't say it was a very good showing as your first debut season, in effect.
And they were using Formula 2 cars.
Yeah, not good.
They only developed a proper Formula 1 car in 1962. So
yeah, that's what I see from us. Yeah.
And as you said, in 1962, Dan Gurney got a win as a constructor. However, I guess we can also mention that they tried. There were talks of them trying to join the grid, and that didn't work
with
out.
Red Bull.
Exactly, Red Bull opted for.
They were an engine supplier in the 80s and 90s as well.
Oh Porsche
as Tag, and also
they
with
had Tag, and then they were actually Porsche with arrows, right?
Yeah, with footwork, but that didn't go very well.
So we've been looking at a few big brands, and I think it's continuing in that vein because Aston Martin in 1959 entered the sport after a success. Well, the same year as they won Le Mans with Carroll Shelby, I think.
I think it was the same car as well. I think it was the same car as well that they used in Formula
Is it the DBR1?
Yeah.
Then it's the same car,
yeah.
Great.
Interesting philosophy there. But in 1950 they entered.
Is it the same Carroll Shelby that made the Shelby Cobra?
It's that.
Yes.
Yeah, it's that Carroll Shelby.
And they had Roy Salvadori, who got a couple of podiums.
Not with them.
If you watch the best motorsport movie of all time, Le Mans '66, that first scene of Carroll Shelby winning Le Mans is in DBR1, which is the car that they entered in Formula One. And I don't think there were many of those, by the way, cars that did Le Mans and also F1.
Okay, so the car they actually used in Formula One, it was the DBR4, but it's quite
Then
similar.
it's not the same.
Yeah. I think it was just a modified. They just turned it into an open wheeler, but it did. Yeah, but they only did. I mean, they never scored. Well, they only did 5 races and never scored any points, so it was a pretty short-lived effort. But still, somehow probably better than how they're doing these days.
I want to see how good an Aston Martin Signet would do on a Formula One grid.
I guess you could quickly mention Nedzo on Roy Salvadori, because he was the Aston Martin driver at the time.
He did a couple of races, I believe, with Van Wall in 1958 and potentially 1957, and he got a couple of podiums, as I said. But didn't Maurice Trintignant, or again, mentioning Maurice Trintignant, didn't he race for them in 1960? Just for a race or two, he may have done.
Yeah, just they only did the British Grand Prix in 1960.
Yeah,
with the DBR5, so they had a new car for that.
Yes, but yeah, it wasn't really a serious, like, we're going to try and become big F1 names, really.
Yeah, because at the time, it must be said, a lot of manufacturers just had a go. It's not like nowadays where you needed a fully backed effort and a fully fledged project that had a lot of funding and approval by the FIA beforehand. Lots of teams just turned up for 1 or 2 races, and it was completely fine. But then in 1961, back to kind of the more obscure car manufacturers, De Tomaso entered a race, and they were in there for 3 years. Just looking at it now, but yeah, again, kind of very much a technicality in terms of, do they count as a team that we can look at, because they only started making cars properly in the 70s. However, yeah, we thought it was interesting enough. They made their first road-going model in 1963. So regarding our homologation model, they don't count. But yeah, I had no idea that the Tomaso did F1, so that's an interesting one. 15 starts, 10 starts.
They also built the Frank Williams racing car chassis, I believe, in 1970.
Yes,
that killed Piers Courage because it was made of magnesium.
Whoops.
Yeah. At that point, it ended because they were like, "Yeah, we're not driving this thing anymore."
Yeah, but they were the first ones to. Therefore, they were the first ones to build a car for Williams, technically. But
yeah, but the thing is interesting. They never entered as their own team. Like, their stuff was only ever used by privateer teams and customers.
Yeah. I'm saying Scuderia Serenissima and Scuderia Setecoli.
Yeah.
But they made it.
Scuderia de Tomaso for one race that Nassif Estefano failed to qualify for.
Yeah.
I'm
guessing that was Argentina because he was an Argentine driver.
No, it was Monza, I think, where he was like 4 minutes off the pole time or something.
Of course he was.
Yeah.
They used the O.S.C.A engine, which we mentioned before, so yeah, nice one.
Yeah.
But yeah, small break from big manufacturers. 1964. Well, with De Tomaso, we had a small break because now we have Honda in 1964, and that was a big one.
Yes. Their first driver, was it Ronnie Bucknam? Their first driver, I believe it was. Obviously, their big success came in 65, but 64, I'm guessing they only did a couple of races because, or at least they didn't do it successfully, because Ronnie Bucknam, I believe, was the only driver, and
they did 3 races.
Yes,
but a year later got their first win with Richie Ginther
at Mexico.
Yeah.
Then they had John Surtees. And then Joe Slasher.
I mean, this was a big thing because at the time they were a relatively new manufacturer in Japan, but they were the first Asian team in Formula One.
Yes,
but they, again, like we mentioned with Tomaso, it came to an end because they had a car built of magnesium that killed one of their drivers.
Yes.
So, but I mean, at this point, I've lost count of the amount of times they've come and gone from Formula One in one fashion or another.
So they came back with Spirit engines in the early 80s.
83.
Then after, they left McLaren at the end of 1991. Yeah, 91, 92.
The V12. Yeah.
Then they came back with not BAR in 1999. They were going to come back as their own work team in 1999. Harvey Postlethwaite died, so that never happened. They then came back with BAR in 2000. Then took over the team again. Did they? Was BAR?
Yeah, it was because it was those Super Life or Super Tech engines in '99, and then 2000, the Honda. Then 2006, they bought them out and became the Works team for about 5 seconds, and then they pulled out again, and we got Brawn GP.
And then they came back with McLaren Honda.
Yeah. And then they pulled out again.
And then they left.
Because Alonso was just like, fuck off. And then they came back again. Did they come back?
They just stayed on with Red Bull. And
but then they went through, now we're called Red Bull Powertrains, and now we're called Powertrains by Red Bull, and, Power Red Train Bull thing. And now they're with Aston, I don't know, now they're with Aston Martin. They just, they can't make their minds up. And I mean, as it stands, they're probably not going to be around much longer. So, they'll probably disappear again.
It must be said that Honda, again, in our homologation section, we must say that they only made their first car in 1963 because they were making motorcycles in the 50s. They're one of those Japanese companies that were doing something completely else, and then they became famous for something that was completely unrelated to what they set out to do, like how Nintendo used to make cards. In 1963,
Go ahead. I was going to say.
Do you say Nintendo? Do you say Nintendo made coffins?
No, cards.
Oh, okay. Oh, cards. Oh, okay. I thought just a coffin, like they would start out as like an Undertaker or something. Yeah.
I was going to say that although Honda hadn't made a car until 63, I'm guessing the Honda Cub had already become a thing by that point. The motorbike. Like
maybe.
Well, they were making
bikes in history. Yeah.
They're making bikes. So
but it's like Yamaha had that perfect synthesis of pianos and motorbikes. Like,
yes,
that's one of my favorite memes ever. I need a motorbike. I've got you. By the way, where can I get the piano? You're not going to believe it.
Yeah.
I think Daewoo make kettles and microwaves.
Yeah. Mitsubishi used to make
fighter planes. The Mitsubishi Zero. Yeah.
So there was one.
Bugatti make toasters.
I saw an Instagram reel lately that kind of sums it up. Yamaha does things that sound good. So piano, motorcycles and stuff. That's the thing.
Yeah.
They don't do porn movies.
No.
Thank you, Nedzo. Maybe they do, and you just don't know. But in 1963, Honda released a K-Truck. They released a two-door Roadster. So that's enough because 1 year later they entered Formula One. So that is a works team by our accounts.
Yeah.
So after that, we move. Well, we've been moving very slowly because 1950 to 1964 has been like
8 years.
A dozen teams.
There were loads of people that entered because the requirements were so low to enter that you could just do it. And
Exactly. Well, 13 years later, Renault entered in 1977, and that was a very big one because they had already established themselves as the primary French car manufacturer. And they entered with a bang in many ways. They entered with the revolutionary turbo system that would shape the sport for years to come. And check out Peter Brook's video on that because it still is the best account of the start of the turbo era.
Yeah, I mean, it's surprising it took this long for someone to attempt a turbo car because in the 50s, like they had some people like Alfa Romeo in their first year had supercharged engines, and they went through phases of banning turbos. But I think they'd been unbanned again in 66 or 67, and it took 10 years before someone tried it. But I think they demonstrated why, because at the time it was very powerful, but it was just blowing up all the time, and so the car became known as the yellow teapot because it was just always going up in a cloud of smoke. And it took a few years before they really harnessed it, and then Ferrari started doing it, and BMW and Honda and everyone else, and then they all took on turbo engines. But that was an extremely French team because it was Renault. They brought Michelin with them. That was their first time in Formula One using radial tyres. Elf was supplying the fuel as well, and then it was Jean-Pierre Jabouille as their driver. So it was just as French as you can get, basically.
And then Jarier and Arnoux and Prost.
Yeah. And then, and funny enough, never actually had any real success from it. But yeah, they kind of fell apart a bit because 85 they pulled out, and then they had a very good stint as Williams engine suppliers in the 90s, yeah. And then they had a mostly good stint, to be fair, when they came back properly in 2002, and then a not so good stint when they came back in 2016, and now they're Alpine. So yeah. They're another one that's kind of all over the place a bit. It's a bit chaotic. It's similar to Honda in many respects.
Just wait for Flav to bring Alonso back pre-season on the 20-year anniversary of the title, and then Alonso wins a title with Alpine, with Colapinto in the other seat.
Mm.
Yeah,
I mean, it's hard to say how Alpine look in testing because they kind of just toot along quite quietly. But to be honest, anything is better than what they were last year.
I think it might be like a 2018 McLaren situation where McLaren said, "Oh, everything's the engine. The chassis is perfect. The chassis is one of the best on the grid, but the engine's just terrible." And then they got the decent enough engine, and then they were better. They were top 5 cars, top 6 cars on the grid, but they weren't outstanding. I think it'll be a similar with Alpine. I don't think they won't be Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren level, but they might be the best in the midfield.
That being said, of course, they don't have the Renault engine, so. Renault's gone completely. For some reason, they're still Alpine, even though they're running Mercedes engines. So they found
Alpine are Renault adjacent rather than Renault. I think if they were still called Renault, I don't think they'd be running Mercedes engines, or I don't think they'd be still called Renault. But I think because they're Alpine, they can sort of get away with it.
Isn't it the CEO of Citroën is called Charles Peugeot or something?
Because I was on Top Gear, the marketing director.
Yeah.
Not the CEO, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, our producer has mentioned... Did you mention the BMW official entry 1967?
Well, I mentioned it. It was in 1969 that the Formula 2 cars...
1969.
Because Gerhard Mitter...
They tried to enter the Nürburgring, and in qualifying, obviously it's a Nürburgring, so it's fine. The top qualifier of the full works entry qualified 37 seconds behind Jackie X. So, yeah, that was the official... BMW entry of 1960.
I mean, this was a funny one because in the late 60s, we suddenly got a burst of Formula 2 cars that only entered the German Grand Prix. And they could be up to...
Because they wanted to fill the grid.
Yeah, and they could be up to like 2 minutes a lap slower than the leading cars as well.
Unless you're Jackie X, and then he qualified third in 1967 in an F2 car.
Mm.
Nice.
Yeah.
Moving on. This doesn't really count, but in the 90s, we thought we would still just mention it to be complete. You kind of had a Subaru Works entry, and you kind of had a Lamborghini Works entry. It's very technical. It's very much rooted in like weird politics. I recommend videos from Aidan Millward and other deep dives because it's quite interesting. But yeah. Lamborghini and Subaru, just take us through it. It's kind of there.
I would say that Lamborghini are definitely the more credible of the two because they had a Lamborghini Works engine, they had Lamborghini backing. Even if Lamborghini didn't want to admit it, they were a Lamborghini Works team. It was a Lamborghini-made chassis. The only reason they didn't call the team Lamborghini was because Lamborghini said, if it turns out to not be a good team, we don't want our name attached to it. And it's a good job they did because it didn't go very well. They were called Scuderia Team Modena. They had Eric van der Poel and what's his name? Was it Stefano? Nicola. It's such a shame that they didn't get Stefano Modena to drive the Modena car. Yeah. But nonetheless, they had Larini and Pola. I think Pola was on Corsa points, I believe, in Imola and got an engine blow up. I think their best result was like 9th place. The car looked very unusual for the time. No side pods. It was a nice livery as well, though. I think that it would have been cool to see Lamborghini continue. They nearly came back with the McLaren engines in '93, and apparently the engines were like a second lap better than the Peugeot ones they eventually used in '94. So I don't know why they didn't use them.
Yeah, I mean, the engine that they were on, that Lamborghini engine, it was designed by Mauro Forghieri, and it was being used by Tyrrell, I think, or some of the other midfield teams were using it for a few years. McLaren tested it.
Lotus as well.
Lotus used it in the
Lotus
late
had it,
80s.
yeah. And I think at that point, Nelson Piquet was like, screw this, I'm gone. But they tested it. McLaren tested it in '93. Senna and Hakkinen, and they were like, "This engine is amazing." And I was like, "Is it really?" I mean, look at the cars that had it, and they insisted it would have been great. But Modena, that was a funny one because in the second half of the season they got out. They were no longer in pre-qualifying, but they still failed to qualify almost every time. So it just wasn't there.
Meanwhile, Coloni Subaru was literally like. It did like half a season because it was just not a good engine, or because it wasn't a good.
Well, they did the full season, but they got rid of the Subaru engine halfway through because it was that big flat 12 thing or flat 8.
A lot of people used to talk about. Well, lately it's become quite famous that they had this flat 12 engine that was just terrible.
It was like, well, I think Bertrand Gachot kind of liked it because he said it was like driving an overpowered go-kart because it would spin in a straight line. Because it also had really weird weight distribution because it was a flat 12 engine. But then when they got rid of that and put the other, whatever the engine was after that,
Ford, I'm guessing,
the Ford engine, they didn't change the engine cover at all, going from a flat 12 to a V8. And so that had all kinds of problems with overheating and everything else. The early 90s was a real... There's some very interesting entries, mostly Italian, that just didn't know what they were doing.
So many French and Italian entries from that era just didn't work out at all.
Yeah. And so many of them were, being sponsored or owned by despots and serial killers and the mafia and everything else.
Extremely dodgy.
Great place Formula One is.
In the 90s, honestly, F1 in the 90s. If there were forums back then, I wish I just saw the reaction of, like as you said, the Auto in 1991.
Maybe late 90s, yes, 97, 98.
But I would have loved for there to be an Autosport forum in 1991, 92 when you had all those weird backmarkers, and I would have loved to see the Peter Brooks of the time discuss that.
Karen Smith.
Well, the thing is, I still need clarification and verification that Venturi was actually owned by a wanted serial killer, and he was killed in a standoff with the police. Because the thing is, I mean, Katayama never gets interviewed. Gachot gets interviewed all the time, but they never ask him about that. Like, so tell us about when you went to prison and Schumacher came into Formula One. They never ask him
because he told them if he took. I was going to say probably because he'll probably tell them in the debrief beforehand, say, if you mention this, I'm leaving.
Yeah, there's a bounty on my head or something. I don't know, but I was like, I need that to be true because that is the best thing that's ever happened in Formula One. If that's true, yeah,
definitely. But now we're into the 21st century finally, and Jaguar entered in 2000, not to be the Jaguar Works century.
They were the Ford Works entry.
The Ford Works entry, because Jaguar itself was owned by Ford and probably still is, but because Stewart, for 3 years before that, they became the Ford Works team.
No, Jaguar is owned by Tata now. Jaguar
Tata? I think. Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay, but at the time it was owned by Ford.
Yeah.
But yeah, before that, Stewart for 3 years had been the Ford Works team, and then they just got bought out by Ford, and they decided, well, we're going to call them Jaguar, because Ford, they've had so many opportunities to just be Team Ford, and they can't do it. They always have to be called something else or give their engines to another team. But to be fair, it's fine because they're really endearing to me because I wasn't really paying attention to Formula One properly at that era. But when I did, I was in love with the Jags because the gold wheels and the British racing green, it was just absolutely perfect.
Shame they weren't that good on track, though.
Yeah. They were. They put the mid in midfield.
In 2000 they had Irvine, Herbert for half a season, and was it Pedro Diniz?
No. They had Irvine for the entire season. No, Irvine, both of them for the entire season. Herbert had a big shunt in Malaysia, and he retired at the end of that year. I think that was the first car. It was something to do with the way he drove because because of his injuries, he couldn't do left foot braking or something. But
yes,
that was the first car that meant he could, or I don't know. But yeah, he wasn't there. But yeah, Irvine was their main driver for the first 3 years before he got went out. But yeah, it was a mess because they had Bobby Rahal owned the team at one point, and Nicky Lauda, and he got fired, and
Gunther Steiner.
Gunter was there, and then eventually they got bought out by Red Bull. Who have become Ford again because they got Ford engines in 2026. I love the Jags. Very, very pretty cars.
But in that debut season, they did score points with Eddie Irvine, 4th and 6th. 4th in Monaco, 6th in Malaysia.
It's almost as if that's what you should be expected to do when you have billionaire owners.
And the year before at Stewart, they had won a race. I mean, Irvine, he got a couple of podiums across the years. He was by far their best driver in their 5 years.
Also, must be said, they just acquired Stewart. Like, they had a base to work from.
Yeah,
Yes.
Although Red Bull said that when they bought Jag and moved into that factory in Milton Keynes, where they still are, there was just shit all over the floor, and it was it wasn't very well kept or something. And they kind of picked up the pieces and turned it into a proper team.
But if looking at again, it's not the same because Jaguar used Stewart's remains and Stewart was quite good. But if Audi finished like 4th, 6th, 7th, 8th, I mean, those were top 10 results in the time with more DNFs. But I think Audi would be quite happy with the results I'm seeing from Jaguar in 2000 here. Eddie Irvine finished in the top 10 8 times in the season. Decent.
Yes.
I just found a Jaguar XJ220 in a Martini livery, and it's made my day.
I'm assuming you've seen, by the way, there was a racing series in America in the early 90s where they took older like, Grand Prix masters, like old racing drivers, and put them on really fast oval tracks in America. And they gave them there was 20 drivers in XJ220s, and they all wrecked them all. It was hilarious.
So so it's like that roller coaster that's supposed to kill you through the centrifugal force. They were like, let's just kill off all these old drivers.
No, but it was insane because those XJ220s were among the most expensive cars in the world, and I have no idea who accepted that. Like those crashes, when there was a crash, it was £1 million crash at a time where.
I suppose maybe they didn't have, because they were brand new, they didn't have that sort of historical or sentimental value that they do now, because these days they're priceless.
No, I know, but still, imagine nowadays just a racing series with just LaFerraris, basically.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
Well, I was going to say Veyrons, but Veyrons are literally 20 years old, which shows how far behind I am with what the latest
Ciarons
are and stuff. The Ciaron, yeah.
Even I had to be, what's a modern hypercar? LaFerrari 2013.
Without Top Gear anymore, I don't actually know what cars are being made anymore. I don't pay attention to that. But I got all that.
I know the Bugatti Divo exists, but that's about it.
There's been, they keep modifying the Pagani. There's that Huayra, which again, I know the ones that are in Gran Turismo, but I haven't played any since Gran Turismo 6, and that game is 13 years old now.
Well, they now have the successor, which is called the Utopia.
Okay. I don't know what Ferrari have done lately, because again, the FXX, that was Schumacher's car, that's nearly 20 years old as well.
Yeah. Don't they have the F80 now?
The main deal at the moment are Koenigsegg and Rimac, really.
But we hit 300 miles per hour as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because because I know the Veyron was 267, and that there was that SSC Ultimate Aero that it got just dismissed by Top Gear, even though it held the official record. But they were like, this doesn't count because we just hate that car. I was like, well, no, it does count.
But also, I think it's because they hadn't done it on a road or whatever. But anyway, as our producer wanted to mention, we said it in the Ferrari section, but Jaguar were on an F1 track in 1950 in the fantastic Ferrari Jaguar entered by
Clemente.
Yeah, which is insane. But I'm also seeing that in 1957, an American guy entered the Indy 500 with a Mercedes W154 that had a Jaguar engine. So I have no idea how you put a Jaguar engine in a Ferrari in a Mercedes.
I love it when it's like Le Mans when there was that NASCAR car that did it a couple of years back, and and what was it? There was more than 10 years ago. What's that really narrow
the
pointy?
Delta Wing.
Yeah, the Delta
Wing.
You get those. You just get those one-off joke kind of wacky races entries. And I love it when they do that because it's like when you've got your custom skin in a cutscene in a game, and it just looks completely out of place.
The NASCAR car was insane in those, especially because we had the LMP2 cars just in front.
Yeah, I mean, people said in the pit lane, you didn't hear it coming, you could feel it coming or something.
Yeah,
I'm assuming you also know about how Roger Ward. This is the reverse of Roger Ward entered a Formula 1 race in the midget car.
Yeah, designed for dirt tracks. I think he was insistent. He's like, "Oh, I'm going to beat all of you because I've got 100 horsepower and 2 gears." And he finished. I can't remember how many times he was lapped.
40 seconds off pole.
Yeah, it's like what
anyway,
do you think happened? Yeah.
Back into the actual teams because we don't have. Surprisingly, we don't have many in the 20th century, which actually says a lot on Audi and Cadillac committing. 2002, big manufacturer, the biggest in the world now. Toyota entered. And what did they have to show for it? What do they have to show for it?
In 2002, not much.
I remember... Again, I didn't really watch F1 at the time. I remember it being on the news then Toyota were entering Formula 1. I was like, oh, that's cool. And they had this, red and white car. I mean, the thing is, they were, because we performed back in the day, a lot of these one-off races, they were like, oh, we've got a car, just put it in the race and see what happens. They were unbelievably prepared because they built a car a year in advance just for testing.
Must be said that this is very relevant because Toyota are the closest thing we have to compare to Cadillac entering the sport from scratch. Right now.
In terms of the amount of investment they put in and the amount of money,
and in terms of like the time frame and everything, that's all we really have.
But it didn't. I mean, their first season was not. They finished. I think they only just beat like Arrows and Minardi in the.
I don't even think. How many points because McNish didn't get any points? Did Salo get any points?
He must have got at least one. McNish had that massive shunt in Suzuka.
Japan.
Yeah, but it wasn't good, and it just after that it was like it just wasn't. There was some potential in 2005, but 2009.
They got points twice in their debut season. Salo finished 6th in Australia and then 6th in Brazil, and then nothing else happened.
Yeah, it wasn't very good, but it was also. I mean, it's famous because the amount they had, I think, a bigger budget than even Ferrari for a lot of it, and they barely got out of the midfield. And then they were
a board-run team.
Yeah, and then they were finally getting somewhere in 2009, and then the credit crunch happened. They're like, "Oh, we just need to quit now." And they built what looked like an absolutely insane car for 2010, which HRT tried to buy, but they wouldn't let them.
And Stefan GP.
Yeah, and then it became a Pirelli test car or something. But yeah, it was just it was a shame. But also, I mean,
in 2005 they had a first dawn. They started the season really strongly in 2005.
Yeah, they did well in 2005, and they got the world's least legitimate pole position in Indianapolis as well. It just never got anywhere, and the cars were just so bland. Like the livery was dull, and the cars didn't look very good, and they just didn't do anything interesting. So
they didn't hire star drivers.
Yeah, it was so. I mean, how Olivier Panis was still in Formula 1 in 2004 beggars belief, but like. But yeah, it was just really.
That is a very good point by Nedzo there. That usually those teams try to get some kind of star driver, and the only guy they really got was like Ralf Schumacher, who was known for being
Jarno Trulli.
But also,
who had been kicked out.
Yeah, but also the only Japanese driver they ever got was Kamui Kobayashi for 2 races. And to be fair, he did a lot in those 2 races, and then they pulled out, and he probably was going to be their big star driver in 2010.
Yeah. But the thing is, I mean, that's the famous thing when people are like, "Oh, Japanese driver, go to a Japanese team like Tsunoda with like Haas Toyota or whatever." That's not how it works. And I think at the time Toyota, well, we need to remember they were they weren't in endurance, but
they were kicking ass in WRC in the 90s.
Yeah, no. In the 2000s, they had fully focused on F1. They weren't in endurance.
They were doing Super GT.
Exactly. But my point being, there was no like big Japanese name, and the one big name was Takuma Sato, who was with Honda. So
yeah. Although actually, Kazuki Nakajima, he was a Toyota factory driver. He did that deliberately because his dad was a Honda factory driver. But because they supplied engines to Midland and then to Williams, and he got in because of that Toyota deal with Williams.
But that's the thing. they had Kazuki, but he was never good enough to become the flagship driver.
They never wanted to, because at the time they had Timo Glock and Jarno Trulli, who were quite good drivers, so they weren't interested in him.
So, but the debut season, if that is anything to account for, in terms of comparing to Cadillac, well, it's still 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 top 10 finishes. I think Cadillac would be very happy with that. So
yes,
with today's point system, that would be quite a good points haul.
That would be just off the top of my head, 30 to 40, which is good.
Similar territory to Sauber and stuff.
Exactly, but the biggest underachievers in F1 never got a win. And then the thing is, we already looked at BMW 2006. To close this, because we're not going to go back into Alpine, we mentioned it with Renault. To kind of close the entries, we have an interesting one. I think they should fully count Spyker in 2007. So they were the Dutch team that took Midland, who had taken Jordan, and they were fully backed by the team, and they were by the car, and they were fully supported by the owners. Therefore, I do not know why Mr. Nedzo here is against us including Spyker, when it was fully affiliated with the brand and backed by the owners.
You look at every single team on this list, apart from Cisitalia, which is one team that did one race in the 1950s. Every single one of them is running their own engines. They're running Toyota's running Toyota engines, Honda's running Honda engines. We briefly mentioned Coloni, but they were running the Subaru engines. Lamborghini was running the Lambo engines. Spyker was running Ferraris. They were a customer team. They are not a works team. Sorry,
but it's just
but they didn't have the money to make their team. Their engine.
It's still not a works team. They're still not a works team.
They built one car in their time. But it's not. It's because it was completely owned and endorsed by the manufacturer, and they were completely on board. They just couldn't build their own engine.
You can't be a works team that doesn't have your own engine. I'm sorry, it's not possible.
Yeah, but you can if you think
Alpine's not a works team now.
Yeah, but in the same way you can if it's their own chassis, because they at least built the chassis themselves. It's not like they're a custom team or whatever, or privateer.
They scored a point.
They did score a point. They scored a Fuji.
Yeah. Well, okay. Either way, they led a race for a bit, so they have that.
Yeah, with the Ferrari engine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they were a very cute team, but Nedzo hates them and wants them to die.
They're a cool team. They're a cool team. They're a cool team. They're a great team. They're a nice little unique thing, but they are not a works team.
Well, we've looked at them, so
there you go. They lost $6 million in 2012. That's interesting. Yeah, they're not in a good place.
But I think that has taken us round to Audi and Cadillac, who, Audi have been doing their job in pre-season, I think is what we can say. And Cadillac have been 5 to 6 seconds down, but hopefully they're going to be better. It looks like they're going to be better. Exactly.
Actually, this is a question. Which one of those two do you think is going to do better, and which one do you think is going to get higher in the constructor standings? I think there's a clear answer here.
Well, Audi. They're already.
There's Audi taking a Sauber team that got a podium last season, and then there's Cadillac, who have no idea what they're doing for now.
Yeah, it does help that we're entering into these really stupid technical regulations, and nobody really has a clue how it's going to work. It feels like the champion is going to whoever plays the best game of battery chicken, on the straight.
Battery chicken. Maybe KFC should enter F1 then. Battery chicken.
Sean Gelael.
KFC was on Formula 2 cars thanks to Mr. Sean Gelael.
Yeah.
Just before we go back into Audi and Cadillac, technically, because if we mention Spyker, I guess we need to give them some credit, and also Peter Brook gets some more attention. Caterham and Marussia should. It is fair that if we count Spyker, we're not going to have a section on them, but Caterham were a very famous British car manufacturer, and they were in Formula 1, and Marussia kind of a dodgy Russian car manufacturer, but they made cars and they got into Formula One. So sorry, Nedzo, but we need to mention them.
Marussia is more legitimate because that is an actual car manufacturer. They're a Russian, like, non-Western one. But they have the same logo on the same car, I
must say the Marussia B2 is insane looking. It looks really cool, but you probably haven't seen it.
Yeah, but with Caterham, that I wouldn't say counts because that Caterham was just rebranded by Lotus, that was owned by Proton, that wasn't actually connected to Colin Chapman's Lotus. And again, we were having discussions about whether we count them as a manufacturer because they were a Ford Works team, but they never made their own engines in Formula One. But they did make their own. Obviously, everyone knows the Elan, the Elise, the Exige, the Esprit, all of that, as well as Formula One. But it wasn't the same. Whereas this Caterham thing, it wasn't. It was basically just Proton, but just giving themselves a different name.
Well, Proton Works.
Yeah, maybe some, and that goes for when they were Lotus before, and then we had that funny thing of the year of two Lotuses in 2011.
Yeah. Anyway, that being mentioned, how do we think Cadillac is going to do? Because as we've seen, Toyota are the only real benchmark we have, and that was also a huge manufacturer that put lots of funds into it, and it didn't work out.
I mean, I'm
also they're coming from a country where there is a car culture, but they haven't really been good drivers historically. Obviously, there's Mario Andretti for the US, but they
have
don't
Scott
produce
Speed and Alex Rossi
and Logan Sargent. But there aren't countries who produce Formula One drivers every year. So I feel like they're kind of in a similar position where there's lots of backing, but they're not going to have that star driver, and they might not really know what's going to happen. Anyway, what do you think?
I think the more pertinent debate with Cadillac is not about not about the car's performance or the team's performance. It's about Lewis Hamilton fans and Max Verstappen fans will finally get the answer as to which of the Mercedes in 2021 or Red Bull in 2021 was faster. Because if Perez beats Bottas, it means the Red Bull was worse. If Bottas beats Perez, it means the Mercedes was worse.
Yes, 5 years later. Yes, that is how it works.
But I think that it'll be similar. It's probably going to be similar to how the other American team has started out. Realistically, it's going to be lower midfield and maybe the odd point here and there. But
are you saying Cadillac are getting P5 on debut?
No,
maybe not on debut. But to be honest, I mean, it feels like anyone could get anything on debut because nobody seems to have a clue how the races are going to work. Half the drivers are scared we're going to have. Yeah, half the drivers are scared it's going to be like Spa 98 at the start of every race as well. But that sounds.
Can you imagine if the start of Australia is actually Spa 98 with some Australia 2002?
Well, Australia 2002, yeah.
Well, I mean, it must be to do with battery deploy because it seems like they're revving for 10,000 years before they set off, and then some people are just pulling away really slowly and others aren't, so they haven't quite got that down. I don't know, but. It's like when you're a little kid and you get those pullback toy cars and you don't pull it back far enough, so it just doesn't go. That's what it's going to be. But the thing is, if loads
also it's just like Mario Kart when someone knows how to do the boost properly and
to time it exactly.
F1 race stars.
Yeah, but it's unless cars are stalling, it's not really going to be an issue. Like it's that. But the Cadillac.
Well, you say that, but the Ferraris were scary on that start. That was going wrong. Like, if we have a car starting that much faster, they are going to be crashes.
Yeah, Charles and Lewis be acting like 2013 Alonso and Mercer.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Well, obviously,
those 2004 videos, like. The 2004 launch control runners, they're scary. I hate when I'm an Alonso fan. I hate when Alonso gets the credit for it. There's the USA 2004 start where he's starting P8 and he's literally second by the first corner just by starting at the same time as the others. I feel like that's what we might get with those Ferraris if.
They found a way of turning the rear wing inside out as well, so they're going to have no drag at the start of race. But that's the thing. I wonder as well with this how that's going to if at the start of the race if the aero all opens up, or if it's not going to work at the beginning.
Surely not.
Because if you can find a way of doing that's cheating. You'll have the best start of anybody. Although actually maybe you'll need the downforce to give you a bit of grip. a race
Traction,
start. Yeah, you might, because otherwise it's not really going to go properly.
But yeah, Audi were thinking lower midfield, Cadillac backmarkers.
Yes. Yeah, the Cadillac. It's weird because when they released the photos of their livery, the lighting they used made it like it was like looking at one of those like a zebra or one of those like dazzled camouflage warships, like it's trying to break up its outline. Because I was like, I can't. It's so bright, I can't tell what is actually going on with the livery, and it's asymmetrical as well. So they've done something similar to what BAR did as well. It's just it's just difficult to look at, like their car. It's a weird livery.
At least there's something unique.
Yeah, whereas Audi's livery is just like my team starter livery number 3. Like it's awful.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, final question on Cadillac. Do we think they're going to have the same tenure as Toyota? Are they going to get a win in their time in Formula One?
Not in the next 5 years.
Unless their engines are awesome, but I mean, Cadillac in general don't have much in the way of racing prowess. They build big luxury bling cars, like
James May cars.
Yeah, they're not really. It's the American equivalent of Rolls Royce.
They've been performing in endurance recently. They got pole position at Le Mans last year.
Oh, they do IMSA, don't they, and stuff like they've done.
They do IMSA and they do Le Mans quite well.
Yeah.
But yeah, before that they did nothing. I've been watching a lot of GT content lately, and there used to be a Cadillac CTS-V in GT racing. So those huge boats that Cadillac make, but against M3, for example.
Yeah, it was. There's a Cadillac CTS-V in Need for Speed Most Wanted, and it felt so wrong, like chavving up a Cadillac.
Yeah.
And that. It's just like this. You shouldn't be allowed to do this. Like it was like in Gran Turismo before, adding a spoiler onto the Cadillac Ciaron and turning it into like a GT car.
That's a throwback Cadillac Ciaron. Yeah. But yeah, let's just think who had the worst and best debut from those manufacturer teams that we looked at, and I think we're going to caveat by not including the 1950 teams because that's stupid.
Well, the best one is obviously Alfa Romeo, if that counts, because it was
everyone's. We don't count that. So
yeah. I can't count 50s. Okay, non-50s.
Honda, Porsche.
Honda's debut season was pretty awful. If you count,
surely Mercedes.
Well, Mercedes had Mercedes were amazing at the start. Yeah,
I'd say Mercedes. Lancia up there, they got pole on their first season. Worst, there are a lot of contenders. That's the thing.
If we think Subaru, Lambo.
If we think only manufacturers, I guess Toyota, Honda,
Lambo,
yeah. Did they score a point? No, they didn't. They didn't.
No.
Yeah, I guess Lambo had the worst one. And Lambo had the worst one because they didn't even want to associate their name to the project. I think that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's us having gone through all of those big manufacturer teams. Is there a particular car brand you would want to enter Formula One who hasn't?
I think I mentioned before. I mentioned before, like to have an actual team Ford would be fun because we never had that properly.
Well, especially as General Motors are entering, so
yeah. But like because obviously Ford have done sports cars and rally, but they never did. There was never a Ford F1 team. But even the Japanese, it's only been Honda and Toyota. Like Nissan have never tried it, or Mitsubishi, or
not
Hyundai. They're Korean, aren't they? I think they're.
I know.
It'd be the weirdest
thing. Hyundai are going into endurance, like WEC. So
that's the thing. Formula One is dying, and WEC is entering its golden age now, and everyone's just going to WEC instead.
Because it's a bit cheaper. You get actual competition against other manufacturers, so you actually are competing against your competitors, and not an energy drink or like the name of a guy. So I think that's why. Cadillac did too, but Hyundai, Peugeot, and all, they've on there.
But like, we had BMW Sauber, but it wasn't quite BMW enough for me. It'd be sort of random. It'd be funny, like Skoda in Formula One.
Yeah,
like
Dacia.
Yeah, or Dacia. Yeah,
I think BMW would be a good one.
Proton.
We have Audi and Mercedes.
Audi
and Mercedes. So BMW would complete the trifecta, I guess.
I mean, again, Peugeot. Well, they're in WEC and stuff, but they had engines. But Peugeot F1 team sounds kind of cool to me.
Yeah.
Or one of
they supplied engines for ages, and that was terrible. So
yeah, but but obviously a lot of American manufacturers are cool. Like having like Dodge or Chrysler in Formula One would be cool.
Chevy.
Chrysler F1 team is insane.
Yeah. Because obviously now we've got Cadillac and we've had Ford and that. But what's the other one that's not what are they called?
Buick.
Not Buick. No. It's one of the like sporty. It's not Dodge. It's not. I've said Dodge already.
Shelby.
I've forgotten now. What
Ram.
the other? Not Ram.
Corvette.
GMC.
American. They've made like I don't know. Not many cars.
Pontiac Oldsmobile.
Pontiac. Yes. Pontiac.
They don't exist anymore.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, they don't make it. They had this like pointy thing that looked like it came out of like James Bond or whatever.
The Trans Am.
No, different one, more modern. But
Firebird.
It's like the Firebird. It was like a Hot Wheels car. It was a concept car.
Firebird,
yeah.
I think that's us having gone through the big manufacturer teams.
Yes, it is. So, well, to be fair, the standards are not enormously high, so I think they'll do better than the vast majority of the teams that we've listed here.
Yeah,
and I guess we'll have to see because not long to go now till Lights Out in Australia. You've been listening to the DRS Train podcast. We're on YouTube and Spotify, and you can find us on Instagram and X at the DRS Train podcast. If you become a channel member, you get access to behind-the-scenes footage and lots of extra content, and you can join our current members, whoever they are. I've forgotten who our members are. Make sure to tune into our next episode.
All of them, please become members.
Yeah, thank you. I can't remember who you are because it's been 3 months, but yeah. Make sure to tune in for our next episode. Stay safe, and we'll see you all next time.
Bye.